Hello dear friends. Global tension continues, much to my regret, but there is an explanation for everything. Opinion piece. Military diversion. Tactics of confusion. Publicised agitation. News to create fear. Confusion, a tactic of war. Diverting attention. Journey back to the golden origin. Everything is in acceleration mode. New message from Matthew Ward. China announces it will attack Taiwan. Pelosi defies China by visiting Taiwan. They are trying to create a war to hide things. Military failure of Chinese electronic components. Taiwan war could collapse. Chip supplies. Russia and the US in secret negotiations on Ukraine. Nancy Pelosi lands in Taiwan despite protests from Beijing. China vows military retaliation for Pelosi's Taiwan visit. Let's start. We are living through a ceremony of informational confusion behind which lies a subtly orchestrated spying plan for the greater good of humankind. Confusion is a diversionary tactic of war. To confuse is to mix up diverse things so that they cannot be recognized or distinguished. It produces perplexity and uneasiness, confusion of mood. Its aim is to disorientate the enemy or divert his attention in order to render him weak and impotent. The dark side is trying to create a war to hide other ugly things. Again, they are advancing a campaign to start a war. They need a war. Their vision of life is to destroy it. If they cannot destroy something or someone, they are dissatisfied. They cannot tolerate your resistance because they are much weaker than you. What we see is a last gasp from the opposition, because they can see that the tide is beginning to turn in a serious way in favor of the light, and they are simply creating a backlash to try to overwhelm those aligned with the light, to discourage them, to distract them, to disempower them once again. People will prevail if they stand firm and hold their inner light and shine with the outer light, and nothing can stop them, says Carl Morrison. Diversion. A diversionary war is an international relations term that identifies a war instigated by a country's leader to distract its population from its own internal conflicts. The concept states that leaders who are threatened by domestic unrest may initiate an international conflict to improve their position. There are two main mechanisms behind the war of distraction or diversion: a manipulation of the effect that causes an increase in the domestic fervor of the general public, and gambling for resurrection, whereby a leader in a dangerous domestic situation makes high risk foreign policy decisions with little chance of success, but with great reward if successful. Diversion is the process of diverting the attention of an individual or group from a desired area of focus, and thereby blocking or diminishing the reception of desired information. In the open field, with a massive military strategy, sometimes a contingent of troops distracts the enemy army to expose its flank or draw it away from a key point of fortification. In illusionism, misdirection is a form of deception in which the performer draws the audience's attention to one thing in order to distract them for something else. Controlling the audience's attention is the goal of all theater and is the primary requirement of all magic acts, whether it is a simple pocket trick or a big stage production, the central secret is destruction. Resistance is the decision to engage with an unwanted energy in a way that doesn't allow you to move much towards what you really prefer. Acceptance is choosing to acknowledge that an unwanted energy exists in a way that also allows you to explore why it is there and to flow beyond it. Killing. The effort of the forces of light to uproot the darkness is hitting the mark. Part of this is the well-publicized upheaval in several countries, and behind the scenes discussions are taking place to end the war and clean house in the remaining governments, says Matthew's latest message through his mother, Susie Ward. In fact, it reveals that direct secret negotiations are already taking place between top Russian and US diplomats on Ukraine. The US Air Force has grounded most of its F-35 fighter jets because a faulty part could prevent a pilot from safely bailing out in an emergency. We are seeing a lot of theater because who would fight a war knowing that a weapon system could fail? Who would fight on the basis of the decisive use of weapons that wouldn't explode? Does this mean that all militaries using Chinese electronic components are likely to have malware designed to fail? I think there is a very high probability that this is true. It would be a logistical nightmare. Despite all this firepower, there will be no next war. The real powers that be won't allow it. They are setting up assets, that is true, but to take down the rest of the orcs under the cover of disputes between the major powers. Light developments. Other developments include planning sessions for major improvements in the world economy, environmental restoration, and the medical industry. And at the invitation of the international group in charge, visitors with technological expertise in these areas are participating as advisors, especially since all activity is in ramp-up mode. Disruption and inconvenience are likely to be unavoidable as they resist the removal of remnants of their network. There will probably also be an increase in fake news from the mainstream media to provoke fear, because they need that energy to keep going. Regardless of how the situations ahead may appear, nothing they attempt will succeed. The ever-increasing frequency ensures the triumph of the enterprises of all forces of the light. Help. You are invaluable contributors to this, dear family. Most of you are not in the trenches, so to speak, but you are very being sent forth the high frequencies that are transforming life on Earth. You knew that when you volunteered to go there, that is why you went, to empower the lava light that is your magnificent souls. Many humankind whose primary focus was on issues related to the health crisis are now thinking about inflation, food and fuel shortages, weather conditions or other difficulties incurred by farmers, or, on the positive side, holidays. In other words, the energy of collective thoughts and feelings is no longer invested much in the subject, and unless it is constantly nurtured, it will fizzle out. No more thinking about it will help to hasten its end. To help the planet maintain balance, the workings of the universe include directing light to where it is most needed. If you send light to a specific situation or place, the universe has to rearrange it, so to speak. So that it can be dispersed according to need. We have suggested visualizing the Earth in a golden white light because the energy goes directly to where it will do the most good. And intention has its own energy. When love is the basis of all you think, say and do, you are living from your heart, the seat of the soul, and that intention magnifies the light you radiate simply by being. To all who have difficulty meditating and visualizing, and ask if we can suggest another method of generating light, Blossom Godchild was given mantra, quotes, I am light, I am love, I am truth, I am. Each word adds more high frequencies to the mantra, and combined with its transformative intention, produces a radiance that flows out into the world. Cataclysms. Earth's civilization perished twice due to its negativity. The first occurrence took place a few billion years ago in linear time. It began with a gigantic earthquake that drastically altered the land masses and changed the location of the waters. The flat surface of the planet became deep oceans and mountain ranges. That earthquake set in motion decades of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that raised mountains and formed others, as well as more canyons, valleys, lakes, seas and rivers around the world. When geological activity stabilized and the planet became habitable again, members of other civilizations arrived and new plants and animals were introduced. Once again, life began in peace, but later arrivals had their own desires and ideas. Disagreements turned into wars, and the negativity began to accumulate. About 1 billion years ago, it reached such a mass that the sudden glaciation wiped out all life forms. Eons passed before the planet was hospitable to life again, and among the new inhabitants were souls who had lived in Atlantis and Lemuria. They were far more advanced spiritually, consciously, and technologically than Earth's current civilization, but eventually some individuals lost their spiritual awareness and used crystals as a weapon. That is what destroyed Lemuria and later Atlantis. Most of both continents now lie at the bottom of the ocean, and the rest form islands in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Other parts of the planet survived both catastrophes. Global food. It was much later when weeks of rain brought widespread flooding and partial planetary cleansing. All life in the lowland villages and hamlets was drowned. Many people and animals and the hardiest plants lived in the higher elevations. As legends were passed down from generation to generation, the ornaments may have included a man who built a large boat to save his family and animals, or perhaps the rulers of the state and church wrote the story of Noah and the ark to show Christian followers the importance of obeying God. That flood episode occurred long after the beginning of today's civilization, which occurred much like the repopulation after all life perished twice, but with some significant differences. Beings survived who came from various civilizations. They created a world with a diversity of races, cultures, and philosophies, and highly evolved souls embodied in whales to anchor light in the depths of the ocean, where darkness cannot reach. Land animals were much smaller and more intelligent than earlier forms such as dinosaurs, which were considered a failed experiment, and many were family-oriented, such as whales and dolphins. Fall and rebirth. In the beginning, people, animals, and plants knew their soul-level connection. They lived together in harmony, communicated telepathically, and each served the others benevolently. Then the darkness descended again. It instilled ferocity in some animals and brutality in people. It suppressed the ability of soul-level knowledge to reach consciousness, which eliminated each person's God consciousness and the knowledge that every life form is a soul. Bodies have self-healing mechanisms, plants have healing properties, and trees have ancient wisdom. Darkness also instilled the concepts of separation, self-service, hatred, fear, greed, deception, and intolerance. That low-frequency condition prevailed for millennia until almost a century ago, when Gaia cried out for help and civilization far away emitted a massive amount of light to Earth, and the frequency began to rise. Now the higher vibrations outnumber the lower, and because the two extremes cannot coexist, the lower frequencies, in which darkness thrives, are rapidly fading. And as the civilization continues to awaken, they will once again come to know their goods and their gods and their inseparable connection to all of nature. Earth's journey back to its origin is in high fifth density includes a gradual return to its original moderate climate, when the entire planet was a magnificent garden. Although the topography was very different then, the coming changes do not mean that the mountains will no longer have snow or that the glaciers will melt into the seas. It means that there will be warming in regions where temperatures can drop to below 50 Fahrenheit degrees, and that regions of scorching heat will become cooler. It means that there will be no more disastrous floods or droughts. Properly dispersed rain will turn deserts into arable land, and the dry beds of lakes, rivers, and streams will fill with crystal clear water. And without the darkness creating negativity, there will be no need to release it in earthquakes, violent storms, and volcanic eruptions. Rumors of war. Nancy Pelosi lands in Taiwan despite Beijing's protests, the first such high-ranking U.S. politician to arrive on the island in 25 years. Pelosi's visit to Taiwan defies China, sparking tensions with the U.S. Last week, the Pelosi family got caught up in insider trading. They sold $5 million worth of NVIDIA semiconductor stock just before the Congress voted on semiconductor subsidies. Now Pelosi has flown to the Semiconductor World headquarters in Taiwan. Cyber attack on the official websites of the presidency and the Taiwanese government. The troubled plans have sparked strong protests from the Chinese authorities, who in response stepped up military exercises in the region, including live fire. China condemns Pelosi's visit to Taiwan and announces military exercises. China urgently summons the U.S. ambassador to Beijing after Pelosi's visit. China's defense ministry said its military is on red alert. China has positioned itself to take further action toward Taiwan, the White House warns. China announces it will launch a targeted military operation. China mentions upcoming military strikes targeting Taiwan. China will begin a series of military operations near Taiwan overnight. The Chinese military will conduct live fire using artillery, aircraft, and missiles around Taiwan's waters. Beijing also promises to launch more large-scale military exercises from 4 to 7th August. 21 Chinese military aircraft entered Taiwan's air defense zone. There are rumors of dozens of US Air Force planes taking off from Japan. China suspends food imports from multiple Taiwanese companies. China says US, in quotes, US must pay a price for Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The Chinese Foreign Ministry urges the US to withdraw its nuclear weapons from Europe. War between Taiwan and China would make everyone lose, as it could collapse the supply of chips to the world. Criticism of China. According to the Washington Post, the crackdown on political freedom and human rights in Hong Kong, including the arrest of Catholic Cardinal Joseph Thing, violates the political promise of one country, two systems. In Tibet, the CCP has led a long-running campaign to erase the Tibetan people's language, culture, religion, and cultural identity. In Xinjiang, Beijing is perpetrating genocide against Uyghur Muslims and other minorities. And across the mainland, the CCP continues to detain activists, religious freedom leaders, and others who dare to challenge the regime. Reset News. Trump would have signed the Restore Republic, according to Charlie Ward. Real Raw News announced that Trump is going to abolish the income tax. It is to say the Fed. United Nations to export 30,000 tons of Ukrainian wheat against food crisis. Gem and breweries may close. Russia cuts off the flow of natural gas to Latvia. Finland closes shops to conserve energy. The Dutch are still holding rallies and demonstrations against the restrictions. 15 billion in fraud exposed in UK House of Lords. Bankrupt Sri Lanka seeks urgent help to feed children. According to the Fulford report, in quotes, the P2 Freemasons made a deal with the Asian secret societies. They promised to put a black communist in power in the US in 2008 in exchange for continued Asian funding. This led to an agreement to use 700 tons of Asian gold to create 750,000 tons worth of gold-backed bonds. This led to the creation of $23 trillion that kept the corporate government afloat until 2020, when the funds ran out. Spain faces the third heat wave of 2022 with sweltering days and nights. Temperatures will remain extreme in most parts of Spain all week. Spain received 7.5 million tourists in June, triple in the number in 2021. The Spanish stock market rises 0.15%, supported by the financial sector. Santander is the worst IBEX bank in 2022, and analysts are beginning to lose patience. The president of Madrid criticizes the Spanish government's plan to save energy. In quotes, Madrid does not switch off. It causes darkness, poverty and sadness, said Isabel Díaz Ayuso. USA. New York City declares a state of emergency. Virginia Democrat Elaine Luria under fire for her stock portfolio. Americas. López Obrador sends a letter to Biden to address the energy dispute within the TMEC trade agreement. He says, in quotes, "Don't treat us like a colony." The Mexican president also ruled out his country joining the BRICS bloc. The dollar falls below 900 Chilean pesos and copper is revalued. The new minimum wage of $450 comes into force in Chile. Easter Island reopens after 2 years suffocated by the crisis. Nicaragua expresses its strong condemnation of Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The Nicaraguan government orders the closure of 6 Catholic radio stations. El Salvador affirms that it will respect the rules of the game in the bond patches operation. Bukele says El Salvador has gone from being the most dangerous country in the region to the safest in Latin America. The president has maintained a controversial state of emergency since last March, which he has called a war against gangs. Fires in the Brazilian Amazon increased by 7.9% in July. Russia wants the West not to try to violate the grain supply agreement. Russia sends the United Nations evidence of the use of banned mines by Kiev forces in Donbass. NATO warships are positioned off the coast of Kaliningrad, and several nuclear submarines are positioned deep. The new escalation of tensions between Serbia and Kosovo was prompted by Pristina's intention to ban the use of Serbian number plates and documents on its territory, a move criticized by Belgrade. Escalation in Kosovo. The world watched as Yugoslavia was torn apart by Western meddling, using provocations to pit ethnic groups in that land area against each other, and in the end the former Yugoslavia was divided into several puppet states. Now things seem to be degrading again, as the simmering of conflict between Serbia and the breakaway Republic of Kosovo intensifies. Israel will spend nearly $150 million on a laser-based air defense system. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.